Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of The New World. And in today's video, we talk about the recent play of the leader of the YNs in sports, Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver George Pickens, who some say it might be time for the brother to be booted from the Pittsburgh Steelers, as we have seen a long line of diva wide receivers under head coach Mike Tomlin. So before we discuss this news, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't, as we're on the road to 10K subs. Turn on those notifications and stay tuned for more content on the way. And comment your thoughts on George Pickens over the final parts of this regular season. Now, fellas, after watching George Pickens in their final game against the Cincinnati Bengals and overall throughout this season, what are your thoughts on George Pickens, and do you think he should still be a Pittsburgh Steeler by next season?
I think that the topic of conversation when we talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers is placed at the wrong feed. We don't need to be talking about George Pickens. We need to be talking about Mike fucking Tomlin. This is on his ass because, as Jay said, diva receivers for the Pittsburgh Steelers is very, very common. It's too common to be a coincidence. It's happened like 5 times at least. Mike Tomlin, I know people are not going to want to hear this because one thing I'm noticing, I was talking to my pops about it earlier today. We've decided to continue to give Mike Tomlin passes for a reason that I will leave up to interpretation. This man's been the head coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers for 17 seasons, and he only has 1 Super Bowl. Now, mind you, the quarterback play post 2016 has not been that great. But I heard Shannon Sharp say this earlier today. What's the difference between Mike McCarthy and Mike Tomlin? What's really the difference? But we view these coaches in 2 completely different lights. Now, I get it. Mike McCarthy has had Aaron Rodgers in his career, but as of lately, he's had Dak Prescott and they had no playoff success. It's the same shit. Yes, you may not have the best quarterback in the league on your team, Mike Tomlin, but if you're as great of a coach as you say that you are, and as we say that you are, got to get it done. And if you aren't going to be able to get it done, I don't need to see locker room issues within your team consistently, because you're supposed to be this. If you're not going to win a Super Bowl, then we need to put out a good product. And as of late, yes, you're having a winning season every year. This is not a good product. And when I see things in this, I'm not really seeing an established culture. I'm seeing Mike Tomlin tolerate things in wins that he doesn't tolerate in losses. Because anytime I hear about George Pickens and him having this attitude problem, being a diva, it's only when they lose. But he's doing the same stuff when they win. He's not blocking when they win. He's not showing effort when they win. If George Pickens is not getting the ball, if he's not targeted, he's not going to run his routes to the full effectiveness. He's not going to do it. And that's something that you're coaching. You're either coaching it or you're condoning it. Mike Tomlin, pick one. He's doing either or. He's either coaching the behavior or he's condoning it. Both is bad. So I don't want to hear nothing about George Pickens. George Pickens is what he is. He's a talented receiver, not upper echelon in my opinion. Like, is he top 10? I don't think so. Because I don't just look at your talent. I don't just look at your skills. Also evaluate your effort. I evaluate how you are as a teammate, as a leader. All of those things come into the fold. Now, we do know that from the wide receiver position, being a diva is just part and parcel what comes with being a wide receiver. But if you're also not as talented as the top receivers in the league, why am I tolerating your play? So George Pickens hasn't shown me enough. I don't know what his contract situation is looking like. Don't know when he's expecting to be paid. I would think that probably after this year. I don't see greatness from George Pickens. And a lot of it doesn't have to do with his skill. It has to do with his attitude. Because one thing we know from George Pickens is when you get in his head, he plays terribly. He starts dropping passes. That man dropped 3 passes against the Cincinnati Bengals. Like, that's abysmal. And I think that if he had coaching that would hold his ass accountable, then maybe we could see more of this quote unquote potential. So I'm always just hearing about George Pickens and his talent, his potential. Been in the league like 4 or 5 seasons? Get the shit done. Or 3 or 4, something like that. Been in the league a few years. Get the shit done. I have not seen improvement from him. I've seen the same guy since he got into the league. I think a lot of that has to do with coaching. So let's kind of pump the brakes a little bit about making an evisceration video for George Pickens. And let's focus on the true problem, which is Mike Tomlin and some of his decisions. Because one thing that we're not talking about in this video is his putrid decision making throughout the course of this season, starting with the Russell Wilson and Justin Fields convo. But I will leave that to another day. Because one thing that we have not been talking about on this platform is the fact that 6 games into the season, Justin Fields leads this team to a 4-2 record, and they go to Russell Wilson. And people were telling me that the reason why they went to Russell Wilson was because he was insurmountably better than Justin Fields, and that this team had the makings to go deep in the postseason. That was the reasoning for why people said that Mike Tomlin made that move. And I said that, well, he has to show me that he can do that, because otherwise it did not make sense. So I've been questioning Mike Tomlin. I think he's an overrated coach. Overrated. Is he a good coach? Yes, but this man's been able to keep his job for 17 seasons, and he only has one Super Bowl victory. Is Mike Tomlin the longest tenured coach as of now? Actively? We see other guys that are we saw Bill Belichick be let go. Bill Belichick, who's probably the GOAT. So why should this man continue to keep his job? For what reason? What is the future of this team? Because clearly, Justin Fields ain't the future. And you gonna give an extension to Russell Wilson? But look at all those behemoths at the quarterback position on this team. So where is this team going? If you're not competing for a Super Bowl, why is Mike Tomlin still coaching my roster? What is our outlook? And we got guys like George Pickens, who are supposed to be growing, and we haven't seen any growth. So you're not even developing your talent. So I'm really getting sick and tired of making excuses for Mike Tomlin. I know we can do it, but we don't do it for other coaches.
George Pickens, this is a guy who I haven't really been that high on as a prospect. When he was getting comps at University of Georgia, I thought George Pickens was extremely talented, gifted wide receiver. He's definitely capable of being a wide receiver number one. On really most teams, he just has that makeup. He can win on the outside, big catch radius, hands are elite for the most part outside this game. The brother has skill, but if you just look at his track record and his mental has kind of let him down. If Mike Tomlin, if he ever wanted to do like just intel before the combine, he really could, because the intel on who was the biggest bust/boom wide receiver in the draft in 2022 was George Pickens. Pretty much all the scouts and all the coaches said George Pickens was immediately the guy with the most upside, but his mental and he can't get out of that funk. If you see all these highlights on social media, basically he is the YN of the NFL. Like, if you just see the highlights, he's blocking guys. He's not even blocking guys. He's really just trying to RKO guys. He's throwing his body around. He's basically, honestly, bullying players. And I've seen this since that fight. I started checking him out when he had that fight. But when this dude got in the fight and he literally hit somebody's head, like, on the stanchion, like, this is who George Pickens is. He has all the talent in the world, and Mike Tomlin, I believe, has kind of failed him, let him down, because, dog, this guy needs some discipline. It is so apparent to me, because Mike Tomlin has had so many divas as wide receivers. Like, you just look back on the track record, Deontay Johnson, we see what he's doing. Deontay Johnson's basically getting passed around like a blunt with all these teams. Like, Deontay Johnson is the Joy Taylor of the NFL. Like, he's basically just getting passed around. Like, it's insane. You see George Pickens, like, you see the conundrum he's in right now, where we're having a discussion if, the Pittsburgh Steelers should let him go or not. You see other guys like, big example, Mr. CTE himself, Antonio Brown, and what he was doing in 2016 and after. Like, it basically fell apart for them. The Killer Bees, when they had best big three in the league, obviously, apparently, and they could not get the job, and they could not win over the top. And Mike Tomlin seems to me, as a coach who, is lovable. I like his interviews. Mike Tomlin, to the average guy, to the average person like me, if I was a soldier in the Pittsburgh Steelers locker room, I'd go to war for Mike Tomlin. But Mike Tomlin is lacking something, and that something is discipline. And we've seen that with his team so far. We've seen that with the iteration of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I believe in 2018 or 17, when they was on social media recording stuff after practices. We've seen this throughout Mike Tomlin's career, and he's a great coach, most likely going to get in the Hall of Fame. Just look off his point percentage. The brother wins games. Like, I understand he's only won one Super Bowl, and that's been under his belt, like, since he's gotten there. He hasn't really won much since that, but they win pretty much 9-10 games every season. And the quarterback play isn't really that good, but the defense, for the most part, stays well, and that's really what keeps them in these games, is having a really competent defense and having at least some type of coaching advantage against opposing teams, especially when they play against the AFC North teams, because those games are mental. And he has the edge on that. But this is really a situation with him and Pickens. They have to get it right. Pickens apparently in the interview was basically confused that Russell Wilson basically said that him and Russ weren't on the same page. When if you saw the clip against, I believe it was Kansas City, George Pickens clearly stopped running his route. It was so obvious. He clearly stopped running his route, didn't care anymore, gave up on the play. And then Russell Wilson, he didn't. I don't think he read the coverage right. It was clearly covered too, and he's gonna throw right where the safety, I believe Reed was at. So Reed was able to intercept that pass, and Russ basically put that off on, him and George Pickens. They couldn't connect. And if you want to be a contending team, and that is your wide receiver number one, you're not going to be competent. And I think that's why the Pittsburgh Steelers have the lowest odds in the playoffs now because of what's been going on. Dog, they started the year off 9-2. 9-2. They're going to end the season off 10-7. 10-7 is going to be their record. They have dropped 5 out of the last 6 games. I understand their schedule got tight at the end, but dog, y'all have to win these games if y'all want to be taken seriously in the NFL. And getting that number 3 spot was so advantageous for them because they're probably going to be facing Baltimore or LA, and they managed to get the 6th seed. They was in contention for the 1st seed at one point in the season. That just seemed so long ago. So this is really a situation that extends all over the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, and it's really between George Pickens and his head coach Mike Tomlin, in my opinion.
Yeah, man, I'm in agreement with both of these guys. Mike Tomlin, he has had a long list of, diva wide receivers. And I don't know what'll be going on with Mike Tomlin. I don't know if this is like an AFC North thing. He just likes these type of receivers or something. The AFC North is gritty and stuff like that. But I don't know what Mike Tomlin, maybe he just attracts them or something. I don't know what it is. We know Mike Tomlin can win. But as far as that wide receiver room, he never has it on lock. It's always some problem with him. And, George Pickens is definitely no exception. He is a clear definition of talent and greatness. His talent, you can definitely tell he won't be a great receiver because he'll just be carried by his talent. But his greatness is what won't, set him apart because he doesn't do, the other things. He doesn't, block when things aren't going his way. He's not cheering, happy when things are going his way and they're winning. You don't see that in Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, stuff like that. But George Pickens, especially after that last game, 3 drops. Are you serious? Against the Cincinnati Bengals defense, 3 drops. And then they were wide open too. And then there were some times where I saw him, he just, stop running his route and stuff like that. And it's dude, you don't know how great you can be if you did the little things. Mike Tomlin, he's going to have to do something about the wide receiver room. If he wants to get back to a Super Bowl, because the defense is always there. Even though he hasn't had all pro, Pro Bowl quarterback since Big Ben. He can get there if he had a better wide receiver room. George Pickens, he's really not a number 1 wide receiver. As of now, he's not a number 1 wide receiver. He's a 2 at best. Calvin, honestly, he's a 3 or 4. If the Steelers wants to get there, something's going to have to change within that wide receiver room. I think that the defense will continue to carry them to a lot of their success. But, George Pickens, his character, I doubt it's going to change, but it's going to have to change to set him apart as being a great wide receiver, in this league. Those Steelers, they did have a disappointing season. This is very disappointing. They were in contention to be the 1 seed.
Why is it disappointing?
Because they dropped off in the latter part of the season. It wasn't just an offensive thing. It was a defense thing too. The defense wasn't,
But what were your expectations going into the season? Because that's what ends up happening. What ends up happening is they get to 9-2, and then we want to reevaluate them. But what were the expectations going on into the season? We look at this talent. We look at the quarterback. They were never going to be a serious contender to win. That was just you guys being prisoners of the moment because they started the season 9-2.
I didn't ever think, the Steelers going into this season was going to be a number 1 seed or something like that. I didn't think they were going to win.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
I didn't think they were going to win the division, but, the Ravens, they just started off pretty bad. And, the Steelers just happened to keep winning games. But then they kind of, flustered at the end. But the Steelers, as of now, I kind of just see them being the second in their division, for a while to come, because the Bengals, they'll continue to, struggle to win a lot of games due to, the roster and their coach. So
what Mike Tomlin is going to have to do is he's going to have to let go of that pretty little NFL record he got of 18 consecutive seasons without a losing season, because they need to tank so they can get a fucking quarterback. They need a quarterback. You're not winning with mediocre quarterback play in the AFC. You're not doing it. And a lot of those things, Jay, that you said Mike Tomlin should do, he's been a coach for 18 years. Is he really going to do any of those things? He hasn't done it since, he's been a coach since 2007. He's not going to do it. That's what I'm saying. They probably just need to move on from him. They've gotten as far as they're going to go. If the team just continues to be 10-7, 10-7, 10-7, they're not going to win a Super Bowl.
I mean, I think they can win the Super Bowl if they had like Eli Manning or something on their fucking team. That nigga, whenever he was in the playoffs, that nigga won a Super Bowl. But
maybe they need to call Joe Flacco ass or something.
Probably, man. He's probably on his couch right now. Not gonna lie, but like you said, I think a lot of this has to do with coaching. I'm not talking about Mike Tomlin, but just if you watch their offense play, if you just look at the scheme and look at the OC. Yeah, I know I was calling for Matt Canada's job last year because the brother was a terrible coach. But if you just look at how the offense is predicated and just look at how George Pickens and a lot of these receivers get the ball, they're getting the ball on vertical routes. Is nothing really in the flow of the offense that can really make the job of playing quarterback easier. It's not. Like George Pickens, he's basically on the sideline every play, and he's basically just running a go route. And if you just put a safety up there high, it's easy to guard that, easy to maintain that. I know last game is not really a good indicator of that because the brother dropped 3 passes, but it's really easy to guard defense like that. It's really easy if your other wide receiver number 2 is Mike Williams, and he's really just a big target, so he's basically going to run that too. Easy to just put a safety up top on him and just man that up or just play zone. So their offense is basically dumbed down to basically the easiest thing you can predict if you're a defensive coordinator, especially if you're going to the playoffs playing against this team. Like the Ravens played this team so many times, they basically know this team in and out. They basically know what they run. We know when the Baltimore Ravens play against a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, still going to start the game out by running the football. They're going to run the football, and they have turned into one of the worst running teams in the league efficiency-wise if you just look at the metrics. Like, they are really bad, man, but they want to run the football, and you get to a point where, you want to run the football and get in that game. Now you start playing from behind because the Ravens are going to put up points. Then you're relying on Russell Wilson, who is an aging quarterback, who isn't really a top-tier quarterback in the conference, to win you games. That's not really a winning formula. So I think their formula of success extends beyond Mike Tomlin. It's basically an entire franchise issue. They need to get out of this mud because they're in a bad situation where it's kind of like the NBA, where you're making the playoffs, but you're like a 6th to 8th seed every year. You're 6th to 8th seed every year. You're in no contention to win a Super Bowl, and you're not getting a high draft pick. So at this point, you should honestly tank. And I think tanking is one of the worst things you could do in the NFL, just tank for the number 1 overall pick. But they should tank for more draft picks because they're not in a winning style situation, and I don't think they will be in there for much longer.